This is Spiritual Mamas Podcast. We're a couple of mamas out here just trying to raise kids, make it through a workday, and navigate mental health, all while going through a spiritual awakening. And we thought we'd take you with us. So grab your favorite cozy drink and let's chat. Hello,
Hi,
I'm Aericka,
I'm Kim.
and this is Spiritual Mamas Podcast.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So today is super exciting. We have a special guest with us. Her name is Gabrielle Celeste, and she's here to talk about astrology because we don't know much about it. And Gabrielle Celeste is an intuitive astrologer, a clairsentient healer. She primarily uses astrology as a modality to help her clients better understand themselves and their unique cosmic blueprint. And she has over a decade's worth of experience in government, corporate, and private industries. And her special offering is her life path reading, where she specializes in identifying her client's soul purpose.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Aericka. Hi, Kim. So excited to be here.
Yeah, so like I said, we're talking about astrology, kind of like Astrology 101, basically. And I always knew about astrology. Like I was very into like, oh, I'm a Gemini and I'm identify as a Gemini. I actually have a Gemini tattoo on my back.
I love it. Yeah, it's so
but
good.
Not a tramp stamp, but it's on.
There's nothing wrong with that too if you had one, or if anyone's listening has one. Yeah.
But yeah, now I'm kind of like I don't really know anything beyond that. And I know that there's a lot more.
Okay.
So
yeah, I'm happy to share everything. Kim, it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that on a very surface level, we know a lot of like the basic terminology, but what does that even mean?
Sure.
I know that you do like the Signs 101 on your podcast each season. So it's good to get like that type of information. But if you have, like, if you're brand new, you're us, brand new to all of this, what would you be telling us about astrology? What do we need to know?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so there's just so much to share. I think that's also part of like what makes astrology so complex, is because I don't think it's possible for one to know everything there is to know about astrology because it's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And a lot of that information, I think, has been passed down by word of mouth. It's in text, and every astrologer is going to have their own interpretation of it. I think most commonly we refer to astrology as just like on a basic level, at least in like pop astrology, or just like the general understanding amongst most people is related to sun sign and like what your sun sign means. But it's so much more than that because there's what's called a natal chart, and everyone has one, and it's based on their exact time of birth, date of birth, and place of birth. And it's all very important in order to cast the most accurate chart. Even if it's a couple minutes off, sometimes people will say it's like 4 minutes off or 12 minutes off, then that will cast a different chart. And it does play an effect if like, you're reading for twins. I actually have read for twins. It's so funny. I was on a podcast, and I was like, yeah, I haven't read for twins. And then literally they found me through that podcast, and then it worked out. And they were
nice.
we love when that happens, right? And they were only 4 minutes apart, and their chart was very, very similar. So it is very circumstantial. But going back to the natal chart, it basically having that information and casting your natal chart, it's going to give you a clear, what I called roadmap and blueprint for your soul's incarnation in this lifetime, essentially. But it really just looks like a picture of the sky at the exact moment of your birth. And it's made up of, the planets exactly where they were at in the signs, and then the elements that those signs, represent, and then the houses that those planets fall into, and then the relationships, which are known as aspects that the planets are making to one another. And all of that put together basically tells a story, and that story is very much related to like you and what you're supposed to do in this
Mm-hmm.
incarnation and in this lifetime. And it really just builds up from there. And so I would say having a basic understanding of not just what your sun sign means, but also, your moon, your ascendant, that's also known as your rising sign, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Chiron in your north node, and having an idea of what those planetary positions or symbols, planets mean, the signs that they're in, the houses they fall into, it just kind of builds up on each other. And so, just as there is, I don't think it's possible to know all there is to know about astrology. I think every time you look at your natal chart, you're going to discover something new about yourself.
Mm. If you don't know like your time of birth, how like can you even do a natal? Because I'm thinking of someone that I've been wanting to do like a human design on, and they don't know like their time of birth,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of like, can you do that? Is it possible?
Yeah. So in astrology, yes. If you have a closer idea to the, at least maybe range or an idea of the range, then that would certainly be helpful. But at least with astrology, if you don't know your time of birth, usually what an astrologer is going to do is they're going to cast that chart to noon. So it's just going to be standard noon.
Middle
However,
range.
yeah, with human design, it's going to be different though, because with human
Yeah.
design, that it seems to really make a difference depending on the chart that you're pulling.
Yeah, I've seen that. So,
When it comes to all of the different signs, like having your top 3
Mm-hmm.
are definitely going to be indicative of the type of person that you are. I think that is my understanding.
Yeah,
When it comes to the other planets, though, do they all impact people in the same way?
totally. Yeah. So the big three, so the sun, moon, and rising, I think when you, at least for me, when I hear what a person's big three are, I can get a general sense of like what they're all about, which is great. And some people are a bit wary to share that, which rightfully so. Like I'm really private, but it's been interesting navigating these waters of creating a brand without people or without sharing too much about myself, which is kind of where I'm at
right.
right now. Yeah, so navigating those waters is quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's like if you're giving your big three, you're going to know exactly what they're about if you have an idea or understanding of what they mean and the signs that they fall into. But then there's also what's called the personal placements. So that would be Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and those are going to give you an idea of what signs they fall into and which houses they fall into in your chart. Again, a little bit more, even more a context about how they apply or what they mean for that specific person. And then Jupiter and Saturn, those are referred to as the teachers of the zodiac, just because of how long they take to orbit around the sun, and then also just the lessons that usually they impart for said person. So you'll get an idea of like what that person's supposed to experience, what kind of karma they're working with, etc. And then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, those are oftentimes referred to as the generational planets. And while they will give you information about that person, they speak to, oftentimes, not always, but they'll speak to just what kind of the energy and the experiences and world events that we're all seeing at once. So, for example, right now, the United States is going through what's called a Pluto return, which is really fun, which is kind of why like the United States is burning down right now. It's not fun at all, but we're seeing a lot of things happen, and Neptune in the spring, he's moving from Pisces to Aries, and he hasn't been there since 1861, and I believe that was the Civil War. So there's that.
Yeah.
And then the Uranus and then Uranus
Okay.
is, I know, so it's like it's kind of telling the story. It's not really, I'm not really helping here, but Uranus is going into Gemini, and I don't think he's been there since World War II. So you kind of see what I'm trying to say here. It's like there's an idea of how this is all kind of going down soon.
Yeah. No wonder, like, I'm seeing all kind of stuff from kind of the people I watch on social media that like the intuitives and the astrologers are like, yeah, shit's going down. Like,
yeah, and I think we've kind of just been preparing for it, and I always like to say that like intuitives, they feel it in advance, but I really feel like a lot of this unfolding began back in 2020, and now it's like really we're really seeing changes happening at hyper speed that we can't avoid, that we signed up for. In my personal opinion, but of course, open for disagreement.
What do you think are some things that we can do to try to prepare for some of that? Like if we know that these major transitions are happening,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
what, if anything, do we do?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for asking. And it's so funny. I always feel like on my social media, at least on my personal, I tend to post more on my personal than I do on my business page, but I'm working through that right now because I'm in the process of a rebrand. And
Mm.
I do feel like sometimes it's more doom and gloom, but it's more like coming from a preparedness standpoint for that exact reason. And
Mm-hmm.
in light of like the Lunar New Year, which is 2 days from now from time of recording, my Chinese astrologer, she's always like, you're not in danger if you're aware. You're not in trouble if you have an idea of what's going on. That's kind of how I like to look at astrology. Is like, all right, you have an idea of like what's coming up and you're working with that energy. But I think on a basic level, just really doing the work and staying in your lane and acknowledging like what you have to do within yourself, I think is one of the best things to do, if not the most important, in terms of how to prepare when we know that these changes are coming upon us. Because when you sit with yourself, what you need to do in terms of healing, you're sitting with your shadow, you're sitting in the darkness,
Mm-hmm.
as Carl Jung would say. Um, that's how you can really lean more into the light. And your light, once you really are coming from that place, it just expands and it affects other people. And that's how we see collective change when we're all doing the
Mm.
work, is my opinion.
Yeah, it sounds like grounding yourself,
Yeah.
like doing a lot of grounding work so that you're kind of I like when you were talking, I got this like image of a tree just like planting down and like just rooting down and like to weather the storm
Mm-hmm.
type situation and
Mm-hmm.
just being like I'm here
Yeah.
and kind of just like ready for it so that you're not just kind of blown away and taken aback. So
Yeah. I love
that's
that.
kind of that's kind of how that's like the vision I got was just rooting down into
Mm-hmm.
your sender, into the earth, into the, like you said, into the collective, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's really well put. I know you mentioned before we started recording that you're working with a shaman, and I actually just started working with a shaman as well in the end
Mm.
of 24. And she said something to me that I thought, well, I was like, oh, she's so right. And it's like, me personally, I have a hard time grounding. Like my upper four, I'm just like, I would prefer to be there if I'm being perfectly
Yeah.
honest. But we're also here on planet Earth, and
Hmm.
it's important to root and to ground into the lower three chakras, because that's how you ultimately can get what you want or what you're calling in or manifesting,
Hmm.
and can thereby enjoy your time on planet Earth more. So I love that metaphor
Hmm.
that you just saw in your third eye.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think that all kind of reminds me of like having that balance too, of like being grounded, being ready. You can see what's coming, you know what's coming, and trying to like be open to preparing for facing that.
Yeah.
Um, but using all of the tools that you have necessary and not just trying to hide away from it or trying to um, like fearmonger or doom
Yeah.
doom scroll about it or anything like that. Just trying to find the balance in it all.
Yeah. I love that you use the word tool, because I think that that's what these modalities essentially are. They're tools, like how to best
Hmm.
understand yourself, how to navigate these challenging waters at a time, and just to like, they just help make it make sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So before we got on, sorry, Kim.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say before we got on, before you came on, Kim and I were talking about. We're like, do you feel like there was like a shift in something today? We both had like just weird, just dumb days. Like it was just like weird
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I felt like there was like block, like weird paths that we were trying to do, and they were all getting blocked today. Which is, I don't know, just odd. Were
Yeah.
you feeling any of that?
Um, I'm doing so much of my like inner healing. I'm working through what's called my Chiron. So everyone has a Chiron placement, and it literally looks like a little key. And the key, like once you lean into that healing, it like unlocks pretty much the abundance that you're meant to just
Mm.
experience in this lifetime. So like
Cool.
I'm in it, so to say. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
yes, but I'm probably feeling it because for personal reasons.
Right.
But
Maybe. Yeah.
yeah, I will say though, I just did my transits for the week. I usually like to pull a card and post a card. That's what I'm doing on social right now on my Instagram. For just like people, like the transits that people can expect this week. And I would say that the big ones are Wednesday. Um, and which is the Lunar New Year. It's a new moon in Aquarius. And then on
Mhm.
Saturday, when there's just a lot going on with respect to Venus and Pisces and her meeting up with the moon and the North Node and Neptune. But to add on to that, this month of January, there's been a lot going on. I mean, like I'm in California, I'm based out of here. And so I'm kind of close to the
Mhm.
fires, but I'm far away to the point where I wasn't directly affected. And
Mhm.
just to see like the heartbreak and the challenges that LA, but also like the world has experienced in a very short period of time within the first month of the
Mhm.
year, like 2025 really hasn't even gotten started.
Right.
So yeah, I do think it's hard to not feel that. So yeah, I would say I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's strange how sometimes that stuff can come up where it's like you know that things are happening. You can see the fires happening. You can see
Yeah.
the challenges that are coming up. And
Mm-hmm.
then for me personally, like today was a strange day where like I'm going about my day and then all of a sudden just like unlock these waterworks that just happen to like
Mm-hmm.
start to come out for whatever reason, and then okay, now back to my day, and then another moment where something happens and then back to my day, and it's like this
Mm-hmm.
back and forth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was talking to one of my girlfriends, and she was explaining to me this was like for her years ago. And she was doing her inner child healing, and she's like, "Yeah, you just cry out of nowhere. You don't even know why you're crying, and you go on about your day. So there must be some healing that you're really addressing. That
There you go.
yeah, it's just part of the process, I suppose."
So, we didn't ask you, but how did you kind of get into astrology?
Oh gosh. It's a long story. I like to tell it on podcasts, but I'll keep it relatively short. So there's this transit. It's called your Saturn return, and your Saturn return happens between the ages of 27 to 30, and then again a second time between 57 to 60. And the first one is really, it depends on where one Saturn is in your chart and which house he's in. And basically, he's going to come back to that point in your chart, which is where he was first at the exact moment of your birth. And it's essentially your astrological initiation and induction into adulthood. So if you're not on path at
Okay.
this point, you're going to be as a result of that. And it's kind of morbid because there's this thought, it's called the 27 Club. And the 27 Club is when
Mm.
you've heard a lot of like, musicians or actors kind of just checking out because they're like,
Mhm.
not this lifetime, next go around. And
Mhm. Yeah.
so, right, it's wild. And
Yeah.
my Saturn return was me becoming essentially the fall guy for a multi-million-dollar internal investigation. And it
Oh
was,
God.
I know, it was wild because it was the result. It was like an internal investigation after 4 years of external investigation with the Department of Justice and the FBI. So the company I had worked for had
Mm.
really gone into some stuff, and
Mhm.
as a result, now looking back, I'm like, oh, this was divine orchestration because I wouldn't have left on my own. But
Mhm.
throughout that process of navigating it, I knew exactly what they were going to say, what they were going to do. And then I realized I was like, this one doesn't make sense. But then it was basically like my psychic intuition coming in. And I was
Mhm.
having a really hard time. And my girlfriend explained to me, and she'd been a yoga practitioner, and she had just come up on astrology and really studying that. And she's like, this is happening. And before that, like when she looked at my chart, because she had asked me for my birth information, I didn't even know at what time I was born. So you can find that on my
Mhm.
birth certificate. And then she had pretty much said, like, you're not going to be out of this until this period of time. And so from there, I just was hooked and never looked back.
That's cool. I mean, not cool that that's what happened, but
Yeah.
it's cool that that's what sparked
It's
your
kind of like an
journey.
epic story of coming into this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Are there parts of whether it's astrology or your spiritual work in general that you find more challenging or that you dislike?
I thank you for asking that. No one's ever asked me that. And I think one of my takeaways, I would say, in the last year has been acknowledging how much of a responsibility it actually is, because you want to ensure that, like, you are not leading anyone on the wrong path by maybe saying the wrong thing, and just trying to be as clear of a vessel so that you can relay divine information. And I think on the back end, it takes a lot of work to really show up in that way, which is, like Aericka working with a shaman, like looking at your inner stuff, taking care of your body, and, acknowledging that your body is, for me, like one of the greatest divining tools. And there's a lot of back end stuff that I think I have to do that I just want to show up and be able to do as best as I possibly can, because I think I tend to attract a little bit more of the challenging readings. So I see a lot of like the darker stuff in my nature of work, but I also think I was meant to in this lifetime. So yeah, I would say just really upholding the sacredness of the work and acknowledging the responsibility and just doing the best that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that you have more of the darker readings attracted to you? Is it like your energy or your ability to like, I don't know, let it go through, I guess?
I think it's my birth chart, honestly, like to bring it back to astrology. So your birth chart's going to give you so much information about just like what you're meant to do, and like even the types of people you're supposed to work with, what's like you're best suited for in types of businesses and the industries. But I have a placement that's called my Pisces moon in my first house is trining Pluto in the eighth, and the eighth house alongside Pluto. So Pluto's at home in the eighth house, and the eighth house rules over themes of sex, death, transformation, rebirth, just natural, like a little bit deeper than surface level topics. And my moon in Pisces on my ascendant makes me very sensitive to energy. And I think because they're both in water signs, just having the ability to sense into it is, but also just like the nature of what Pluto and Scorpio in the eighth house represent. I think that's part of the reason why I do track that.
When you're either looking at this for yourself or looking at it for other people, are there times where you find that like revisiting the birth chart or looking at something like horoscopes, I don't know if that's something that you do, but if that would be more useful than other times?
Yeah, it's so funny. I don't think I do it for myself as much as I probably should. And it's kind of like that accountant reference where it's like the accountant needs like an accountant because they're literally doing it for everyone else than themselves. But I would say that if you're really feeling like you're about to be going through something, because you have an idea, everyone has intuition, and it's just a matter of like how clearly you can hear yourself. If you know that you're coming up, or you just have that like inner voice speaking to you, but then also if you're going through like a challenging season, I would say that that's a really good time to revisit it. And then generally, if you're not going through that type of season or in that period, I think looking at it once a year, maybe around your birthday or at the beginning of the year, depending on what works best for you, is really great because you get an idea of the energy that you're working with over the next 12 months.
It kind of gives you like a good reminder or like future reference point for what's coming up.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good way of putting it.
So there's the big three, right? You said the sun, the moon, and the rising. Is that what you said? So, like I said, I always heard about the sign or the sun sign. Is it more that you're more, the moon sign is more your personality, or like how do you interpret like those three?
Yeah, I think every astrologer is going to have a different take on it. For me, the sun represents the most common like expression I think is vitality, but because the sun literally casts light, it's more like a focal point depending on, of course, the sign that it's in, but then also the house that it's in. So for example, if your sun in Leo is in the ninth house, for example, the ninth house is all about like teaching and learning higher forms of education or modalities. And Leo is very much the performer, and it's meant to, create and express through visuals. I would say that that's very much like a visual teacher, a visual artist. So yeah, it's like kind of putting all the puzzle pieces together and then like translating it that way. But I think the sun really casts focus on like what you're supposed to do. I think the moon speaks to your innermost world with respect to how it relates to emotions, your emotional understanding, where you can really hear your emotions. For example, if you have a Sagittarius moon, Sagittarians love to travel because they're ruled by the planet Jupiter. And I think that, and I know I have a couple of direct family members that have this, they really
Mm-hmm.
thrive and come to self and have an idea of like, just get a better idea of themselves when they're traveling. And they have a clear idea of like what they want to do for themselves as well. And then the rising sign, I think the rising sign's maybe the most important because it casts the chart. So like if someone knows their rising sign, and if you say like, "Oh, I'm a Pisces rising," right? Like pretty much
Mm-hmm.
someone, and if someone knows it about you and like has an idea of what the planets are doing, they're gonna have an idea of like where those transiting planets are affecting you in your birth chart, and like you can get an idea of like what's coming up. But the rising sign is also an ascendant. It's also known as ascendant. It's really like the essence of your soul. It's the like your just like your true vibe, I would say. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
when you hear like Gemini say, "Oh, like I'm a Gemini, but I really don't relate to being a Gemini." It's kind of like, well, it's maybe because they have like a Cancer rising. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope that made
Yeah.
sense.
Okay.
I do think that makes a lot of sense. It's actually making me rethink some things from everything everything I didn't know that I thought I knew. I recently learned what my three are, and one of the things that you mentioned before, like about a Pisces moon and being sensitive to other emotions and things like that. I think that's what you were saying. Is it possible for that to be something that like kind of comes online later
Totally.
for a person?
I think so. I think because also like you tend to become more aware of yourself as you experience more life as you get older. And I mean, this is, I mean, how I felt as a kid. I felt like I was running out of time. I mean, I still feel like I'm running out of time, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do until I was in my late 20s, early 30s. And so I think more and more as people come more into their authenticity, especially as we have more spiritual awakenings and just, the state of the world really causes one to think about like and reflect of like what one truly wants. I think more and more we're going to see people making shifts and pivots later on in life, especially in their 30s and 40s and maybe even 50s. I wanted to ask him, what's your big three, if you don't mind?
Aquarius sun, Pisces moon, Virgo rising.
Happy almost birthday. Yeah.
It just passed.
Oh,
Yeah.
happy belated birthday. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you always driving? Because I've noticed that Virgo risings are always driving.
Like physically driving?
Yeah, physically driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I it's not like I drive for a living or anything. I work from home, but anytime we go anywhere,
Yeah.
I'm the one who's driving. Yeah.
That is so funny. I love that. And I've noticed in my Virgo rising friends, they're always sending me voice notes when driving, which is great. So I'm like, okay.
That's hilarious because she just did that to me the other day and says, "You need to do more of them."
Oh, that's so good. It's so good.
Oh, I'm laughing so hard right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And Pisces moons, I mean, I can relate to having a Pisces moon. That is, yeah, that's a sensitive moon. It's a very psychic moon. It's very, you're very aware of like those around you. And like if you walked into the room, like you could sense what's up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's very true. I feel like that has changed for me over time. When I was younger, that was like I could sense what was going on, but I was always trying to like manage it and like, okay, what do I need to say? How do I need to say it? Where do I need to go? What do I need to do?
Mm-hmm.
And as time has gone on, it's like I sense what's going on and then I feel it and I start to like, if somebody's feeling sad, I start to get sad. And it's like, let's pause for a second and try to manage this a little bit better.
Yeah, and it's like acknowledging like what is and isn't yours and establishing emotional boundaries, which is really hard. I get it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that Virgo moon helps.
Pretty interesting though to see some of those like patterns with any of those signs.
Yeah. And then Aquarius, I mean, Aquarius is just, it's fun. I have an appreciation for Aquarian energy that I don't think I really appreciated until my Saturn return because my Saturn's in Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask another question that's kind of astrology, kind of spiritual, kind of all over the place. But
Mm-hmm.
Aericka and I talk often about like what we do on a day-to-day practice that like is helpful or anything like that. But I've been thinking lately, like, what are some things that you can do for fun that helps to bring balance in your life and that, like with all your spiritual stuff?
I can't believe I'm saying this because it's like one of the things that I struggle with the most, but I would say grounding. And I mean, doing what is grounding for you, something that I really now I'm thinking about because one of my girlfriends, she's about to start her business and she's like, I need a name. And she's like, I need to meditate, you know, to get said name for her business. And I was thinking about that on my way here to record. And I was like, why is this coming in right now? And I was like, oh, maybe it's because I'm supposed to share it. But one of the things that I love to do to ground is to literally go on walks, like just to get outside in nature. And then I was thinking about it, I was like, wow, like all of like my deepest, like creative thoughts, like the name of my business, how I wanted to like build it out, the name of like my upcoming course. It all came to me when I was on a walk. So for me, like getting out into nature and really spending time cleansing my energy because I'm in nature and just walking and breathing fresh air has been something that's super supportive. But I think that can look like a lot of different ways for people. I know breath work works, literally meditating, pulling a card at the start of your day. There's so many different things that you can do.
Yeah, I think it's probably, I don't know, maybe it's just something that I want to do, but I think it's good to have like experiences with a lot of different things to find what works for you, because I know that not everything works for everyone. But also realizing it doesn't all have to be work. Like
Yeah,
it can be something that you enjoy while you're doing
totally.
it.
Can you, because I know that you guys are focusing and speak a lot to balancing it out, literally like this rabbit hole
Mm-hmm.
of a life and then work itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
can I just ask like what you're doing now with respect to, I guess, enjoying it a little bit more?
Um, that's, I guess that's a tough one. I think I try to find balance in um, doing things like grounding, which I enjoy doing, but sometimes I feel like I'm doing that for a specific purpose. So I want to do things that are just fun to be fun, and maybe more recharging. So if I do things like, reading, or if I do things like journaling, not necessarily like for a specific purpose, but kind of just free writing, whatever comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I think I want to do more of like experiencing new things and trying new things, whether it's activities or being around new people or trying new foods or, just having new experiences.
Yeah, I actually also think that like because you're leaning into all of the examples that you just spoke to, you're gonna find at least I have like literally my shaman in the back of my mind like speaking to me on something she just said. I think you're gonna find even those experiences become spiritual in their own way.
Mm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's fun. For me, like this work is actually like my hobby, and it is fun for me. So it's hard for me to separate. But like one of the new things that I'm really into, because I'm like I need a break from this. And this might be off topic, but like I live for learning about plastic surgeons and how they run their businesses because it's so fucking fascinating to me. And I
I can
live
see that.
right because it's just so different. It's like they're creating content, they're like going to surgery, they look phenomenal. I'm like what?
Mm-hmm.
Like make it make sense. But also just like skincare videos on YouTube and then just like finding new recipes and the tickety talk. Like I try not to
Yeah.
spend time on there, but
Yeah.
it's hard not to. So
Right.
yeah, I know what you mean. And I think it also comes back to balance. But something that I've also realized is like the deeper I go down this rabbit hole and into this work, I'm like, it's all spiritual. So
Yeah, I think so. Like, what was it, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how, because we are fairly new to all of this still, and we're still trying to develop like our gifts and everything. It's like I was saying the other day, I was like, I'm kind of overwhelmed with like I have to meditate, I have to journal, I have to journey, I have to, you know what I mean? Like I have to do this, and it's almost starting to be like overwhelming. And then I need to work out, and I need to, make dinner and meal prep, and so it's like coming back to the no, this is actually it is fun it is a job, it is work, like that. Again, like we said, that balance of, I think because we're so new into this, we want to do it all, and it's not necessarily coming naturally. I mean, it is naturally, but like we're trying to make it bigger. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but yeah. So
Yeah, I know what you mean. Me and my sister Nicole, we do the podcast together. We've definitely like gone through that. Actually, I think that was the season that we were in 2020, end of 2023, 2024. And I don't know, I don't think this word is in relation to that experience, but I think it's for you. I'm hearing integration. So I don't know if you take time to integrate and just like maybe take a break and like let your body receive that like upgrade and like all of the work that you've done and then move forward from there. But I know exactly what you mean. Like it's once you're committed and you want it to be something, it's hard to like, it's almost like if you don't do it, you're giving up on yourself in a way. But I will say that like for energetic purposes, like your body almost needs the rest in order to get those upgrades, because I feel confident in saying that you both are taking your intuition to the next level. And it feels like that's also part of this component and the work that you two are doing through the podcast.
I think that was perfectly said, and it hit the spot exactly. The integration piece. I didn't have the words for it, but that was the piece that I think I'm looking for, because it's doing all of the work, which I can see the progress that's being made, but then feeling like, okay, well, now I've seen that progress and now I have to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing,
Totally.
as opposed to letting it just be.
Totally. Yeah. For me, the way that like I personally experience that, actually there's two things that I want to say to that point, because actually maybe three. So it's almost like you get a taste of the divine and like you get a taste of this work and like how good you feel, and it becomes an addiction and you just want like more and more. But like your human body can only take so much because it needs to rest and integrate. And one of the things that I wanted to share was like I had done in 2023, I clocked like over 100 readings while doing the podcast, while still working out, while working my full-time job. And then I ended up, now thinking back, I'm like, oh, this was a purge. I bled out through one of my cycles and I had to get a blood transfusion. And it's like, yeah. So like, if you don't slow yourself down, your guides and your body are going to slow you down. So it's super important to like, just really lean into that. And then the other part is like, and I don't think I realized this until I started working and had one reading. And then later on, almost like a year later, when I started working with my shaman, something that was relayed to me is that like I felt like I kept needing to like study and add to my plate and do all the things because I enjoyed it. But I think on an underlying subconscious level, it was related to my self-worth and feeling like I needed to do it all, because like that would make me worthy in the eyes of others and then being interested in my business. So yeah, it's super like complex and deep as you get into it. But I think because you enjoy it and you're following your joy, it's going to be something for that reason.
It's like, it's from what I'm hearing from you, Gabrielle, is that almost like you took it, that masculine came into, like that masculine energy took over, which we talk about all the time, that we are very much masculine energy driven. And so it's like, no, you have to bring that feminine energy back, like, you know, just trying to keep that balance of the two energies. But yeah, it sounds like the masculine was kind of like taking over there, which is kind of what I'm hearing now that we're talking about too.
Yeah.
It's that do, you know, not the let's sit with it. Like, let's
and
breathe with it.
Something that I think now I think one of my biggest takeaways from 2024 is that like the feminine energy is actually what sustains the masculine, and rest is just as important. And so, yeah, I know what you mean though. I think it's almost kind of like we've seen a flip in society where like women are really leading from a masculine place and with that energy, whereas like I know this isn't for everyone, it's just a generalization, but like men, they're just doing the best that they can and they're more on the feminine side. At least that's kind of been my experience and how I've, you know, observed around me. But yeah, I agree. I definitely think that was masculine energy to the T.
Yep. Sneaking in on you.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So I was going to ask specifically about like if there's any sort of, I don't know if it would be called like astrological events or something that we need to pay attention to. I'm thinking specifically of something like a retrograde, which I love to hear about, but I don't really
Yeah.
enjoy.
Yeah, like Mercury's in Gatorade.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, what
so
does that mean? Like, what does a retrograde mean? I guess we can even just start there.
so the scientific reasons behind it cannot get into for that, but I
It's
can
okay.
give a general idea. So it's basically like when a planet is revisiting a degree point in that sign that it had previously been within, depends on the planet, but like let's just say Mercury within like the last 3 weeks. And it's pretty much giving like the general theme for any planet that goes into retrograde. It's giving revisitation energy. So it's like, say Mercury was in Leo in like on July 22nd, right? And then come and then he moves and he goes forward and he goes to the other degree points. And then come August 15th, he starts to retrograde back over those degree points in that sign. So it's like what transpired from July, whenever, through that time that he was like in that period, that point of the sky, what happened for you, because you can almost like relate themes or exact experiences that happened at that time that might be coming up again in the future, like say, August. And you're really looking to the themes or those exact experiences that occurred to reflect on what you've learned, where you've grown, where you haven't grown, where you need to release. And so that's kind of like the general idea for a retrograde. And each, depending on what the planets represent, it's going to give you more insight as to what could occur. So, for example, Mercury rules communication. So you're always hearing like Mercury retrogrades, like people are, having to do things twice. Their text messages never went through. Their computer's giving them issues. So it's stuff like that. Whereas, like with Saturn, for example, those are like hard lessons, usually big life experiences that are occurring during the retrograde. It's really letting go of things that don't serve you anymore. Venus retrogrades, kind of two-folded. It depends again on the sign or the element that they're in. And for you specifically, it's going to depend on where they're at in the chart. Venus retrogrades can bring war, but Venus retrogrades can also bring past loves, like from previous lifetimes. So that's kind of every planet's going to mean something different. But the general theme with respect to retrogrades is revisitation and doing things twice and so forth.
Would those be the times then that you want to pause and let things integrate and rest, or would those be the times that you want to do something else?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say more with what you just said at the beginning about integrating and resting and just kind of seeing what's coming up for you. But again, that's where the specificity, and it's, I think, a little bit more complex. I think that's where it's going to be more important to understand your chart and to see like, okay, like this Venus retrograde is happening in my first house. Like, how am I, being reborn again? Like my identity, the essence of myself, how I present myself. What does that mean for me? What does it not mean for me any longer? And how am I moving forward? I think is how I would explain that. But yeah, general consensus is to rest and reflect and integrate. I love that.
Yeah, that's good to know. I think I'm sure that we're not going to get to like everything that there is to know, but just the stuff that we've covered so far, it's like, oh yeah, there's really benefit in being able to like go in and understand your own chart more, where all these signs are, what they mean for you, how they present for you, and on a day-to-day basis, what that can change for how you interact, I guess, with yourself and others.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that understanding your chart too, at least this is really why I got into it. You can just get a better idea of who you are and like can understand yourself and put language and context to feelings that are usually harder to articulate or others may not be able to express or reflect back to you, but at least you'll be able to understand it for yourself.
Yeah. Do things like the moon cycles have as much of an impact in astrology?
I think so. Yeah. So the moon changes sign every 2 to 3 days, and it likes to be in more places in certain parts of the sky than it doesn't than compared to others. So, for example, it loves being in the sign of Taurus. It's called exalted being in the sign of Taurus. It hates being in Scorpio. and it rules over Cancer. So it's at home in Cancer. And I personally do. I mean, I'm a Cancer, so I'm ruled by the moon. And my dad's always like, "You're so moody." And I'm like, "I am. It's because the moon is changing signs every 2 days. And you know what? You signed up for it." So he's a Virgo, but poor guy. He has nothing but girls. And yeah, I mean, I've learned so much. Also, paying attention to my cycles with respect to just like where the moon's at and whether I'm synced up with like a new moon or a full moon, and what that would previously and historically mean, and like how it's affecting me. So I completely think that there's something to the moon cycles.
Where do you think would be the best place to start? Like outside of knowing your big three, what would be like the next thing you'd want to learn about or get into?
In terms of learning astrology?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, shameless plug. You can book a session with me. But I think just starting and just accepting that it is overwhelming at first, that there's a lot to it, giving yourself time and following what part of astrology I think you're most interested about. Because every astrologer is going to interpret it differently and explain it differently, and every astrologer is going to specialize in something different too. And there's a vast world related to astrology. So I think maybe just pulling up your chart, having an idea of what the planets mean, and then where they're at in your chart, and then just going from there, I think is a really good start. And that's actually a good question for me because I'm in the process of putting together my first course because I'm planning on teaching. So I'm
exciting.
like, okay, yeah, I'm excited. It's time. I've been in my business for 3 years come April, and I started this journey in 2020. So I'm 5 years in the game. I think I'm ready to share. But yeah, I think that would be my answer.
So that's a good answer. But as far as the teaching, listening to your podcast, like from the get-go, I was like, when is she going to have a class? From the get-go. That was my thought. Is like, I thought, oh, she's going to do this. Like, she's going to teach something. Like, does she have a class? Like, from the get-go.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I received that. Yeah, it's something that I think I'm really, and this has been the way I felt about it from the start. And this is no shade to anyone specific. I don't want to do it just for the money. I want to do it right. I really want to make sure that like my students are understanding and digesting this information, because I think this work in general, not just astrology, is so sacred. And I think that people are like, I think astrology is the study of God, and I think we're doing God's work. And I really want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I can in terms of teaching, so that like my students can understand the concept and modality so that they can help others, because this changed my life and it really got me out of a dark place. And so I really hope to teach others to do the best that they can too.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I love that. I'm excited for you and all of that.
Yeah, I'm in the works. I just got my photos today for my rebrand, so I'm rebranding too.
So exciting.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on, but this year I'm like, okay, this is the year. It's time. I'm in the year 1 in numerology, so I'm starting the 9-year cycle all over. So it's a good time to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Outside of, working with you, which I absolutely will plug because I have had an intuitive reading with you. That's how I found you, and you were spot on. You were amazing. So anybody that wants to work with you, I highly recommend it. And if you're up for it, we'll put the information in the show notes. But where could you get like a website to kind of, is there a website that you would recommend to find your chart that's kind of reputable? Because I'm sure you could just Google anything, and sometimes maybe it's not quite the best place to go.
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking. So there's 2 charts that I use. One primarily that's free. I also have my own software, but don't start with the software because that's expensive. So, but the chart, the website that I use primarily, so it's astro.com. And then there's astrocharts.com. And astrocharts, it's going to give you the same information. It's going to break it down a little bit more, and it's very pretty. But astro.com, when you go in and you go to the left-hand side and you'll ask for free horoscopes, so you'll have all of your birth information ready to go. It's going to create your birth chart in extreme detail in the Placidus type of astrology. And you can pull your chart up from there, and you'll get a very, very clear layout of what your chart looks like with all of the houses and so forth. So I would use astro.com.
Cool.
And it gives you like the information. I've seen my chart, but I have no idea what it means with like just the pictures.
So it's not going to give you the information. I think that's where understanding how the chart works is going to come into play. But I think that's also kind of like how you basically open up that door to the rabbit hole, because it's like, okay, I have a Pisces moon in the first house. Google, what does Pisces moon in the first house mean? And then you just build from there. Yeah. And then you'll start to pick up the lingo. It's like, oh, okay, like this is what this means. If I have a Pisces moon, like in March, like it's going to be highly affected, right? And then also there's so much free knowledge out there. Like I binged like thousands of hours of YouTube when I first started this. And when I felt like I couldn't, or I was just craving more and it was time for a mentor, that's when I started to invest in that. And then I really believe that the teachers that you're meant to work with, that the universe is going to guide you to them. So yeah, I would say Google.
100%
Google,
agreed.
Yeah, Google and Astro.
Nice.
Cool.
I had a question. Someone else go. I'll come back to the question.
I'm sure it'll come back to you. Well, I have one ready to go. When you're doing birth chart readings, is that what you call them? Natal readings?
Yeah.
When you're doing that with someone, are you looking at it in a particular type of lens to begin with, or are you waiting to see what information they're looking for? How do you make that decision?
Yeah, I think at first I was just like, here's everything, and I realized, and I think that's also where like the spirit of a business is going to talk to you and tell you how it wants to work through you. So then I got creative and I was like, all right, let's just ask in a form. So I will literally ask in my form when you book with me, it's like, what do you want to get out of this reading? Is there a specific area of life that you're interested in? And then we just go from there, because the chart covers every area of life. But I will say that the key themes that I think any reading is going to cover, usually it's money, career, and love. And then health, somewhere in that vicinity. So I actually, what I'll do ahead of time is I will go into meditation, or, I mean, at this point I can pretty much show up to a reading, and I'm very grateful that I get information on the spot. But I will show up to a reading and I'll relay messages to said client, that their higher self or whoever is giving me wants me to share with them. And what I've found is that astrology is, what psychics are doing is they're reading the energy of the planets and their upcoming transits. So yes, I started with the technical and I started with astrology, but now my readings are a little bit more psychic than anything else. And if anything, the astrology conserves my energy. So they're very much hand in hand, but I usually just ask, like, what do you guys want to focus on? And we go from there.
So that actually ties into that was actually sort of like my question is, there's other, like there's, what is it, for different types of charts. So the natal chart, there's a chart for people who, like, if they are going to move, they can move like, where should they move? And people like business readings and stuff like that. There's different, like, kind of specialties, right?
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah. So there's the natal. So the natal is really just having your basic understanding of your birth chart. Then there's a transit chart. So the transit chart, depending on how forward looking you're trying to get an idea for, I don't like to go past 12 months because a lot can change in a year. So there's transits, so you can specifically look into that. There's also what's called a solar return chart. So that's your birthday chart. So it is getting an idea of what the planets have in store for you for the next year. And that's very much related to location. So like your location will affect your chart for the solar return chart. And there's astrologers that specialize in literally just that. I'm like, yeah, that's not for me, but I know how to do them. For me, my readings are a little bit more like, let's work through, let's see what's coming up for you and what the planets are doing in your chart and where the gift is, but let's also look at your energy field and see what are your blocks before you can get to that point, and at least arrive at that point in like the most healed version of yourself that you could possibly be at that time. So it's kind of a balance for me. There's also astrocartography, and that's literally looking at the exact locations that are best for you to move to work, to visit, to travel, etc. There's synastry charts, which is putting your chart with another chart of another person and seeing like if there's compatibility there, if you guys have had past lives, if this could work romantically. And then honestly, like the list goes on and on. I think there's a chart for anything.
That's cool. So we're coming up on pretty much time. Is there any other like last questions? Gabrielle, if you want to say anything more that we didn't cover or plug yourself there.
Did you have another question?
No, I was going to ask if there was anything that we didn't ask that you were like waiting for us to ask, or if there's anything that you think people should know.
I would say using astrology as a tool to best understand yourself and not lean into fear mongering is maybe one of the best things that you can do, because that's what it's meant for. You're meant to experience it too. So I think that would be my final thought. But yeah, shameless plug. You can find me at www.agoastrology.com, at agoastrology on Instagram. I host a podcast with my sister and my other sister, soon to be. We're the charmed ones in real life. It's called
nice.
Yeah, it's called the Spiritual Sisters Podcast. And then for those that maybe a Zoom reading or like a full reading isn't right for them at this time, I do have an Etsy shop, and I can provide those links to you guys. And it's a written reading, and it's kind of just like if you need any guidance, then that is how you can best find me.
Yeah, awesome.
I love that.
Definitely go check out all of those things for Gabrielle. Like I said, it was amazing working with her. I love listening to the podcast. We've learned a lot from that, and just enjoy you guys talking. And so I think we're going to call it. And thank you so much for coming on. We had a really good time, and hope you did too.
Thank you so much. Sure. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to share it with my audience too.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.